This wealthy woman hires a maid without knowing that it is her own daughter, abandoned since birth. It was early in the morning at Pierre Claire's grand house, where the sun struck the windows as if to awaken long-buried secrets. Mama Abe, the housekeeper, moved with brisk steps, adjusting the curtains and scolding the young gardener who had once again forgotten to trim the hibiscus. That day, a taxi stopped in front of the large gate. A young woman stepped out, clutching a small bag. Her name was Awa. She came from far away, from a dusty village by the river where people still washed in the stream and children ran barefoot through the fields. She hadn't dreamed of working as a maid, but life sometimes pushes your feet where your heart doesn't want to go. And besides, it was Father André who had sent her with a letter and a firm recommendation. She is serious, clean, polite. Take her. That's what the letter said, which Mama Abe had placed before Madame Cani. When Awa entered the house, she was struck by the silence that reigned there. A silver silence, cold, suspended, like a breath held for years. Madame Cani barely glanced at her. Can you cook? Yes, madame. You sleep where you're told. You speak when spoken to. You make no unnecessary noise. Understood? Yes, madame. She turned her back. Thus began Awa's new life. Awa settled into the small room near the laundry, a windowless space with a metal bed and a rickety wardrobe. She carefully placed her bag there, and at the bottom, wrapped in a knotted handkerchief, was a small red pearl necklace. She never wore it in public. It was a keepsake, an object with no clear explanation. The old woman who raised her, Mama Sira, had simply said, "This is all I could save the day you came to me. Keep it. One day, it might serve you." That night, alone in her room, Awa caught her breath. She was 23 years old, neither fragile nor naive. But in this house, something unsettled her. Not a threat, but a feeling. As if the walls were watching her, or her steps were following an invisible trace. Days passed. Awa learned quickly. She had a quiet way of doing things without noise. She ironed Madame Cani's silk scarves with almost religious patience. She knew her favorite teas, her reading habits, even her silences. The other maids liked her, discreet, kind, but there was something deeper in her, a gravity, as if she carried a past heavier than her actions suggested. Madame Cani began to notice this girl more than she intended. At first it was small things, the way she smiled, folded laundry, or set a plate down silently. Then, her gaze, direct, calm, but too familiar. She didn't understand why this young woman irritated her at times and touched her at others. She reminded her of someone. But who? One day, Awa was tasked with organizing the drawers of the living room, an old piece of furniture untouched for months. While sorting papers, she found an old ledger, postcards, and a torn photograph. She put it back, but her fingers brushed a small piece of paper, folded 4 times and yellowed by time. She hesitated to open it. In the end, she tucked it back into the drawer without a word. But something deep within her had been stirred. For several nights, she dreamed of water, a vast river, a floating basket, hands letting go. She woke up sweating, and each morning, she resumed her work as if nothing had happened. Mama Abe watched her in silence. She knew but waited. She prayed more often. One evening, as Awa cleared the table, Mama Abe stopped her gently. "You look tired, Awa. Are you okay?" "Yes, Mama Abe." "Do you think about your family back there?" "I don't know. Sometimes I think I've never really known who my family was." Mama Abe paused. She didn't respond, then said softly, "Sometimes family isn't what we think, but God always reveals what's hidden." Awa nodded but asked no questions. Not yet. Madame Cani, meanwhile, began to feel different, irritable, tired for no reason. She grew annoyed more quickly, spoke less. She felt something shifting in her house. She called a doctor, who found nothing. She even had the house purified by an old aunt who burned leaves and chanted incantations. But nothing changed. Until one day, while tidying a wardrobe in her own room, she found a small leather box she hadn't touched in years. She opened it without thinking. Inside was a baby's bonnet, a thread bracelet, and a torn photograph. A memory from another time? She put it all back quickly, but her heart raced. Why did Awa's face keep coming to mind when she looked at that photo? She told no one, but that night, she dreamed of a baby in her arms, a cradle she abandoned, and a promise she pretended to forget. Meanwhile, in her windowless room, Awa held her necklace between her fingers. She didn't know why, but she felt something approaching, something significant. The days grew heavier, not from work. Awa performed her tasks with near-invisible precision, but from something else. Sometimes she felt her name echoed in the silences, as if it had been spoken here long ago by someone she didn't know. One Saturday morning, the maid Genebu fell ill and was sent to rest. Madame Canny, who disliked disruptions to her schedule, ordered Awa to clean her private salon, a forbidden space where she received privileged clients for beauty consultations or discreet meetings. The marble floor was cold, the mirrors framed in gold, and luxury perfumes lined up like precious soldiers. Awa cleaned in silence, focused, when an unexpected client arrived unannounced. An older woman, well-dressed, gloved to her elbows with a soft but confident voice. "Is Canny here?" she asked. "I'll fetch her, madame." "No, wait. You're new, aren't you?" "Yes, madame." "What's your name?" "Awa." The woman paused, her gaze lingering a moment too long on Awa's face. "Awa, a lovely name. Where are you from?" "The village of Segu." "Segu?" the woman murmured, her eyes narrowing. "I know that region well. I was there long ago, very long ago." "How long have you been here?" "A few weeks." She smiled, but there was something uneasy in her smile. "You look like someone I knew once. A proud woman, very alone." Before Awa could respond, Madame Canny entered the room, elegant in her navy blue tunic. "Oh, Yande, you're early." "I always am when I sense the day will be long," the woman replied with a smile. She placed a brief hand on Canny's arm, then added, "I was just talking to your new girl. She's special. She's a villager, discreet, clean. That's all that matters to me." But Yande remained silent for a moment, her gaze lost in Canny's earrings. "You know, the things we bury always sprout elsewhere, don't you?" "Don't start, Yande," Madame Canny sighed. "What's done is done. You judged me enough 20 years ago. I'm not judging. I'm just saying the air has changed in your house, and I'm telling you to be careful." Awa overheard this from the next room, not understanding. She didn't yet know that the whispers between these women spoke, without saying it, of a past she carried in her veins. The next evening she decided to write a letter to Mama Sira. It wasn't meant to be sent. There was no address, but rather a way to put words to paper. "Mama, I feel like I've arrived at the place you never wanted to name. You raised me with kindness, but you never told me where I truly come from. Here, things are beautiful, but everything feels locked away. I feel like I'm walking on fragile ground, as if each step could unearth something buried. There's this woman. She's strong, impressive, but there's something in her. Something I feel without knowing what it is. Have you ever seen her face too? Is there something you hid to protect me?" She folded the letter and tucked it into her bag between her notebook and the handkerchief with the necklace. The next day, on Mama Abe's request, she went to the market alone. A simple task: buy fish, onions, and fresh spices. But that day, she got lost. Not in the streets, but in memories that surfaced at a market stall. An old woman was selling fabrics. As Awa passed by, she saw a worn red cloth with a cowrie pattern that hit her like a slap. She stopped, her heart pounding without knowing why. "Do you want to buy?" the old woman asked. "No. I mean, it feels like I've seen this fabric before. It's an old pattern. They used to wear it by the river, back when midwives tied it around babies." "Babies?" "Yes, to protect them. It was a birth cloth. You know, my girl, some fabrics remember more than people do." Awa bought a small piece. She didn't know why. She folded it, ran her hand over it, and returned home with a strange feeling, as if she'd come closer to something. That evening, as she put away the groceries in the kitchen, Mama Abe entered silently. She looked at Awa, then at the piece of cloth on the counter. Where did you find that? At the market. It felt familiar. Mama Abe approached slowly, touching the fabric with her fingertips as if touching an old wound. This cloth. I think it saw you before I did. Awa looked up. Mama Abe, do you know something about me that I don't? A long silence followed. Then the old woman said simply, I know the truth always comes, but never before its time. She left, leaving Awa alone with her thoughts and the piece of cloth pressed against her heart. The house seemed quieter than usual that night. Even the usually playful wind had retreated into respectful silence. Lying on her narrow bed, Awa stared at the gray ceiling. There was nothing to see up there, but her mind searched for light. She felt herself sliding toward a truth still blurry, as if the world around her was trying to speak a language she didn't yet understand. The days resumed their rhythm. Madame Canny hosted guests, attended meetings, and made long phone calls from her glass-walled salon. Awa served her diligently, speaking little but always present when needed. With each interaction there was a faint shiver between them, imperceptible to others. Something suspended, inexplicable, a bond or perhaps a taut rope between two banks of the same river. One evening while Madame Canny was out at a gala, Awa was allowed to use the house's library, a locked room filled with old books and dusty memories. Mama Abe had slipped her the key, saying, Go educate yourself a bit. You've worked well. You can read, but put everything back as you found it. Awa entered with reverence. The room smelled of old paper, leather, and something moving, as if the walls themselves held secrets. She ran her fingers over the book spines, then, between two pages, found something more intimate. A photograph of a young woman, much younger, sitting on a chair, her hand resting on a rounded belly, her gaze distant, alone, without a smile. That face, she knew it. She saw it every day. It was Madame Canny, pregnant. Awa's heart stopped for a moment, not from fear, but from shock. She closed the album gently, put it back, and left the room as if waking from a dream, her breath short. She didn't know what to think. It might be nothing. An old, forgotten photo with no story. That night, she barely slept. The next day, she doubled her focus on her work, as if to prove she'd seen nothing. But her movements were no longer automatic. Her mind circled that image, awakening shapeless childhood memories. One afternoon, one of Madame Canny's old aunts arrived unannounced. A tall, imposing woman wrapped in a scent of incense and black soap. As she entered, her eyes fell on Awa. She stared for a long time without speaking, then pulled Mama Abe aside in a corner of the salon. That girl, she whispered. I've seen her somewhere. She's a maid, Mama Abe replied, her voice cautious. Don't lie to me, Abe. She has our family's face. Don't you see her cheekbones, her eyes, even her hands? They're like Canny's grandmother's. You're talking too loud, Yeye. You think God sleeps? You think the children we cast away don't come back to walk in our steps? Look at that girl. She's not here by chance. She walked away, leaving Mama Abe with a heavier weight on her chest. In the days that followed, Awa noticed the looks changing, not malicious, but uneasy, suspicious, as if they were waiting for her to discover something she alone couldn't yet see. She decided to write another letter, this time to herself. There's a mystery here. I feel it. I breathe it. But why am I afraid to ask the right questions? Do I have the right to know who I am? Is searching a betrayal? Sometimes I see regret in that woman's eyes. Something unsaid. Something that scares me and draws me in at the same time. She tucked the letter under her mattress. The next day, she decided to visit Father Andre, the man who had sent her here. The old priest lived in a modest presbytery, surrounded by books and medicinal herbs. Awa, he said upon seeing her. What are you doing here, my child? Father, why did you send me to that house? He looked at her for a long time, then sighed. Because I followed a call I didn't fully understand myself. Sometimes God pushes his children where truths lie sleeping. And you, Awa, carry a truth that no one can keep buried for long. Do you know who my mother is? He looked away. I know that love can be frightening and that old wounds can silence even the bravest. But I believe you'll find what you came to seek on your own. And when that day comes, you'll have to choose. Forgive or flee. Awa left, troubled. She hadn't gotten a clear answer, but she felt everything converging, like a slow, silent, unstoppable tide. When she returned to the house that evening, Madame Canny was in the garden, alone, a rare sight, sitting under the mango tree as the sky turned orange, the sun melting into the leaves. Awa approached slowly. "Madame, would you like me to bring you some tea?" Madame Canny looked up, staring at her for a long time, then said, "No, just stay. Sit for a bit." It was the first time she'd asked this. Awa sat a few steps away, not too close, not too far. A silence settled between them, but something beyond words passed, as if two souls once separated recognized each other in the fading light. Awa felt a strange warmth in her throat but said nothing. Madame Canny, her gaze lost in the branches, murmured softly, "You know, I've often dreamed of a daughter I could have had. And sometimes I wonder if dreams are trying to tell us something." Awa didn't respond, but that night she didn't sleep. She knew the walls would soon speak. The next morning the light filtered softly through the shutters, casting pale lines on the floor of a day that would no longer be quite like the others. Awa rose early from her bed. She didn't know why, but everything in her was taut, ready, as if waiting for a signal the world itself would give. As she left her room, she crossed paths with Mama Abe, who had risen before dawn as always. They exchanged a long look. This time there were no pretenses, no half-silences. "Are you ready?" Mama Abe whispered, her voice barely audible. "I think so," Awa replied, calm but firm. "She's waiting for you in the salon." Madame Canny was seated, her gaze fixed, tense but determined. On the coffee table she had placed a small, dark wooden box, its varnish aged, the one Mama Abe kept hidden in the spare room, the one she had once buried like a wound. When Awa entered, she saw it immediately, and her heart began to beat faster, harder. Madame Canny gestured with her hand. "Sit." Awa sat. A long silence passed. Then Madame Canny opened the box slowly. She took out a small yellowed baby bonnet and a photograph, which she placed face up on the table. Awa recognized the woman. It was her, Canny, younger, more fragile, but unmistakable. "I carried you," she said at last to Awa. 24 years ago, you were tiny, so dark, with long fingers like my father's. I held you against me for one whole night, not knowing what to do. And in the morning, I decided to make you disappear." Awa said nothing, but she didn't cry. "I was afraid. I was alone. Your arrival threatened everything I had built. Your father never wanted to know you. I was young, foolish, ambitious. So I entrusted you to a wise woman who promised never to reveal your existence, and I swore to forget you." She took the red necklace from Awa's hand, brushing it with her fingertips. "This necklace, I placed it on you the night before you left. It was my mother's. I never thought I'd see it again. When I noticed it on you weeks ago, I felt dizzy. But I told myself it was impossible, that it couldn't be you, that God wouldn't be so cruel, or so just." "I've always had it," Awa murmured. "Mama Sira said it was all she could keep from my past." Madame Canny closed her eyes for a moment, her breath trembling. "I never had other children. I watched you grow here without recognizing you. And yet, every day, I felt something slipping away. I looked at you like one looks at an old dream, and now I have no more excuses." She stood slowly, walked around the table, and knelt before Awa. "Madame, don't do this," Awa said. "I'm not asking you to forgive me or even accept me, but I owe you the truth, and I wanted you to hear it from my mouth, not from others, not later. Today, I want to tell you that you are my daughter, my only daughter." Awa felt her hands tremble, her breath short. For a moment, her entire past flashed before her, the long days searching for a face, the half-whispered prayers, the unanswered questions. And now, the answer was here before her, raw, alive, unexpected. She steadied her hand. "I don't yet know what to feel," she said, "but I'm here, and I'm listening." A vast silence fell over the room. Then, slowly, softly, Madame Canny wept, tears of regret. That evening, Mama Abe prepared a stew that tasted of childhood, not for guests or employers, but for the mother and daughter. Awa ate slowly. Madame Canny barely ate but stayed at the table with her. The maids whispered and gossiped about Awa. "We knew that girl wasn't ordinary," they told Mama Abe. "Now she'll act superior since she's above us." "Calm down, my children," Mama Abe said. "Don't be jealous of the mistress's child. Keep your hearts clean toward your fellow human, and you'll see life smile at you sooner or later. Listen to my advice." After the meal, Awa took out her notebook, where she wrote her letters and thoughts. She opened it to the first page and gently tore out the note she'd written to herself days earlier. She crumpled it and placed it in the trash. She no longer wanted to flee or guess. She wanted to exist. Later, as the house was nearly asleep, she knocked softly on Madame Canny's bedroom door. "Come in," said a tired but gentle voice. Awa entered. The room was bathed in warm light, a light blanket and a book on the bed. "I want to know," Awa said. "I want to know everything. Who was my father? Why were you so afraid? Why did you let me go? Not to judge, but because I don't want to walk blindly through my own life anymore." Madame Canny invited her to sit on the edge of the bed, and that night, she spoke for a long time. About her youthful years, her mistakes, a forbidden love, the child she tried to forget, but her soul could never let go. She spoke of her ambitions, her sacrifices, her sleepless nights. The more she spoke, the more her voice broke, the more her gaze became human. Awa listened without interrupting. When she finished, there were no more questions, only a soothing silence. Awa stood, took a step toward the door, then paused. "I don't yet know what I'll do with all this," she said. "But I know one thing, Mama." Madame Canny flinched softly at the word, hearing it for the first time. "I'm here now, and I'm no longer a stranger," Awa said. She left, and that night, for the first time in 24 years, the house seemed to breathe. A few months later, a quiet change occurred. Awa no longer wore the maid's uniform. She no longer lived in the windowless room. She now had her own room, decorated to her taste, near her mother's office. At Madame Canny's insistence, she had begun taking management courses. Her mother saw in her more than an heir, a flame, an extension, a new beginning. In this mended bond, in this slow reconstruction, there was a truth. Sometimes roots wander, twist, and lose their way, but they always find the earth again. And in that house, once filled with silence, there was now something stronger, a mother, a daughter, and a promising future.